Hey, it's Rod Yates here. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned. And my special guest today is artist, songwriter, and producer Amanda Warner, also known as MNDR. So MNDR first came to mainstream attention in 2011 when she collaborated with Mark Ronson on his song Bang Bang Bang. Amanda's path to that point was long, winding, and almost impossible to sum up in an hour, but we're gonna try. Her story starts in rural North Dakota where she was raised and moves through the punk and underground DIY scenes in Portland and Minneapolis, and then the underground noise and techno scenes in Oakland and New York in the early to mid-2000s. None of which would suggest a future career as a pop writer, producer, and performer, but that's one of the worlds MNDR currently operates in, working with artists like Charlie XCX, Rita Ora, and Kylie Minogue. As you're about to find out though, MNDR is not your typical pop persona, and her outlook is still very much informed by her underground DIY experiences. We cover a lot of ground in this interview, but we start by talking about MNDR's new album, Hell to Be You Baby, and some cool merchandise she developed around its release. Before we jumped on, I was admiring one of your latest pieces of merch, which is the Emotional Strategies cards. Where did the idea for that come from?
They're really inspired by Brian Eno's Oblique Strategies. And if you're not familiar, it was a deck of cards he developed for when he got stuck in the studio. He would pull a card and maybe it would say mute all the bass, and he would mute all the bass, and I think it just like unlocked. It would just force you to hear things differently in a new perspective, so it unlocked that creativity.
That's very cool.
These are emotional strategies of someone I am an anxiety patient, as probably 99% of all musicians are, but I'm diagnosed with panic attacks and this and that. So I spent like the last 8 years really working hard on different tools in my toolkit to deal with anxiety. And I developed these to sort of get me out of bad thought patterns. So what are some of the messages that are on those cards that you're holding? Okay, so some are very abstract and some are like, here's one I really like, emotion versus logic.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Turn down the volume in your head.
Yeah.
Grow is one. One is just don't eat shitty. Like eat well. Tell me more. Breathe deeply is one. Be strong, be open. Dive in, double down. Don't be afraid to try, basically.
And these are all based on your experiences and messages that you've either taught yourself or been taught from other people?
Yeah, probably through therapy and like just really trying to get out of control, panic attacks under control. So I really went deep into like really PTSD studying and like workbooks and mindfulness, although I don't really take to mindfulness as much as others do, but I would say it's all in the same area of understanding your senses and learning how to regulate your emotions and your anxiety.
How do you go with that now? Have things like these cards and that therapy helped you get that under control?
Oh, big time. Yeah, like total life change. But I mean, it took years to sort of even reprogram those receptors in your brain, they get set in a certain way and that's neuroscience. So, and through like different trauma events or et cetera, or for whatever reason, you're just genetically, built for anxiety. But I also think like, I also like my anxiety because generally it drives you to achieve.
Right.
So I don't necessarily hate it all. I think that's kind of part of the process too.
Right. So with those, I mean, the timing of like releasing those cards around the time of the release of Hell to Be Your Baby, are some of the themes that are represented in those cards or even the idea behind those cards, they also reflected in the record?
Yeah, absolutely. So really I went on this journey to get that part of my life under control. Really at the beginning of writing this album, it took me like 8 years to finish it. But also I'm a songwriter and I'm a producer and I have other projects. So I wasn't just working on this for 8 years. But it is a concept record, and I'm sort of, I take on like a benevolent cult leader. I also have a macabre fascination with cults.
Who did you base did you base your cult leader on anyone in particular?
No, I actually based it opposite of what most cult leaders are. So I'm a benevolent cult leader. I don't want your money and I don't want your power. I don't want those things from you. I actually just want you to be happy and find that happiness within yourself. But I'm not looking to exploit or profiteer off of you.
That's a nice cult. That's a cult to be part of.
but with branding and stuff, I probably look a lot like Manson cult era, and to be sort of on the nose with that stuff.
Okay, so what's the journey throughout the album or throughout that concept?
Well, it's really about the journey to sort of set your brain free from like the digital world, I call it the two-dimensional world, and to find your happiness outside of like the onslaught dystopian reality of the digital world.
Okay, like algorithms and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So with algorithms, is that the algorithms that feed you your Instagram feed or your Spotify suggestions, or is it just all of it?
Yeah, but heavy on social media. And because I'm an artist, even if I wasn't forward facing, we all have to participate on these platforms in order to gain more work, right? And, and again, I worked on these themes for over 8 years. So these platforms have evolved, and they kind of evolved in the direction I thought they were going to go, which is like out very heavily algorithmic control, right? But I also thought it was really funny that we talk about followership. That word is so religious to me. Mm-hmm. And like, will you follow me? Are you a follow? Did you follow them? Right. Da, 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 da. And I just had all these connections to cults and religion really and then I saw like, oh, this is really like, feels like an extension of the cult of personality. And then, and I have other issues with, I have greater discourses with audience ownership and things like that. But as we move into Music 3.0, which I'm very much a part of and very excited about, that's really about audience ownership. I don't think all this is negative. I just want to talk to my audience. I want to talk to all of them. If I build them, I want to talk to them. Right. If they're a part of me, I don't want to build it and then have to pay to get to them, aka Instagram and Facebook.
Right. So what does Music 3.0 look like?
Well, I a lot of it is blockchain and a lot of it is like Bitcoin driven. That really is the space. And I'm not participating in NFT art and at the moment, not because I'm not interested in it, more just that I feel like I like to put thought and intention behind anything I do and to do my research. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm throwing trends at the wall and there's no real like strategy behind it. And I just don't even do that with music. I'm just like, I don't know. That just, maybe I overthink it, but whatever. That's me. That's what you're going to get. So this idea, it's not even an idea. To me, it's like growing up in punk clubs and DIY scenes and artist lofts and art communes. Like, it's just building your community. It's like me taking flyers to a show and handing out flyers to come see me play. Same idea, gathering people's email list, sign up on my mailing list, making my website like very comprehensive. And then I'm a big Discord person because I want to build my own server. I want to talk to my community in real time. I don't want to just show them a picture and then like comments that are coming in later. Mm-hmm. Like, I am on my Discord every day. It's called Gacked on Gear. I can talk about that later, but it's really about things that I care about. And then my community, I can elevate people to moderator and then they build the community. It's about community.
Okay. Community is a key word there. And, you mentioned your community and how you built community coming up through punk clubs and DIY scenes. And I would love to talk to you about that and particularly your path to that, because it's such an interesting route growing up in North Dakota. And I think I've seen an interview where you pretty much described it as the middle of nowhere. Was that where your farm was? Was it literally in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah. So I grew up on a 5-generation farm of like Scandinavian immigrants, but my mom is like French Canadian. I grew up right south of Canada.
Okay.
And so it's just like a farming area, and it tends to be either French Canadian or Scandinavians. So
Okay.
This is important because these communities still speak Swedish and Norwegian, if you can believe it. A very old dialect of them. No, I don't understand any of it, though. But the very old people, it's very interesting. But so it's the least populated part of the lower 48. I love it dearly. It's on it's in the Red River Valley, which is the prairie of the United States. So, and it's right on the river. There's a river that flows north called the Red River, and it's right on the border. I grew up North Dakota and Minnesota, and it's the coldest part of the lower 48.
Really? Like what kind of temperatures are we talking?
40 to 50 below, not wind chill. It's like 40 to 50 below. Like they would send us to school in 40 below. But
really?
Also, I went to a school where there was maybe 23 kids in my class max.
Okay.
Like in my grade.
Wow.
So very isolated. And it's only like 2 people per square mile, maybe 1. My closest neighbors were miles away from my farm.
But when you were growing up, this is just normal to you, I guess. Or did you feel that sense of isolation, or were you just, this is just normal?
No, totally normal. Yeah, and my dad is a farmer and a musician, and we just had musicians over, and he had a very modest 4-track reel-to-reel recording studio in our basement with lots of instruments. He was in a lot of bands. You know, he comes from like 60s. He was in a lot of like blue-eyed soul bands and things like review type bands, like Stax Records kind of things. And so I just grew up like that. But culturally, everyone in my community played music. I don't like many instruments. It's just, I think it's like a Scandinavian thing. Okay. Music is part of culture. So I was not weird that I could proficiently play 3 to 4 instruments by age 12. Really? That was like kind of normal.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was like super normal, but not rare. Not rare at all. Not a rarity there.
Is that because it is so cold and it's so isolated that this is a pastime that you can engage in?
Yeah, I think so. And like, I think like I grew up playing in church and, you know, but up there, at least then, it wasn't, evangelical. It was just like a Lutheran, like really boring, like a very like Protestant Scandinavian. It was just like Garrison Keillor. It literally was Garrison Keillor's like Prairie Home Companion. And I love it dearly. And all those people, because it was so small, those people are really like family to me. Like my kids I went to school with, we're all very close, like siblings close.
Okay.
I don't really have that like, oh, like that Mean Girl high school that they make a lot of US movies about. I didn't really, I certainly felt like a weirdo, but I don't think I was an outcast by any stretch. But that really didn't exist. Weren't enough people.
Well, I'd seen that you'd called yourself a weirdo in previous interviews, and that's what I was going to ask you. Like, how did you feel like a weirdo? Where did you not feel like you fit in some regards? I
never felt like I was interested in anything like most people were interested in. But I did not live in a populated area, but I wasn't interested in maybe like tropes that are associated with my gender. I was like very interested in bass and jazz. I was very interested in music producers. I was very interested in who played everything on a record. Yeah. Why did they play it? What other records are they involved with? It's just like music. I always tell everyone, I'm like, your lives that I grew up with, I'm like, your lives were so interesting. You did all these things. I don't think it's a big surprise. I just do music. That's all I ever did. Still doing it. But I just know a lot about it because I care about it. And I'm obsessive compulsive about things I like.
And was that fed from your dad? Your dad's love of music and the way that he played? Did that feed your love of it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But our house was just full of music. It was just full of music, but it was just part of our lives. It wasn't like, and then the music, it just was like music. We have people coming over and playing, and then you have to like. I have like studied concert piano. I was like a competitive concert pianist. But I also accompanied my dad my dad's a fantastic singer, and he was your go-to wedding and funeral singer.
Oh, wow.
And I generally would play piano for him for a lot of those.
From what age?
8, 10.
Really?
Yeah, maybe a little young. Yeah, 8 years old, maybe. I remember playing with him, and then I started singing with him, but I never really had the pipes. My dad's like a great singer. I just kind of can sing, I would say, in a quirky way.
Right. So these are your first
Yeah.
performances?
Yeah, I mean, I was just performing. We were just kind of doing that. I don't know. It wasn't like like, I remember, like, it wasn't like the Jackson 5, but maybe a version of it.
The North Dakota version of it.
Yes. But my dad had really great taste in music, so I'm very like grateful for exposure to great music.
Like what? Like that soul music that you were mentioning
Yeah,
before?
man, like Julie Driscoll. My dad was like really into Julie Driscoll and Brian Auger and like kind of like out there weird psychedelic like soul stuff. And my sisters had really good taste in music, and they were like wickedly goth and like super cool and had like the coolest, just like peer into there, just be like, oh God, this is the coolest place on the planet. Teenage girl zone. And it was just like the best time to be a teenage grumpy goth girl in the 80s. The Cure, the Smiths, like Depeche Mode, like Skinny Puppy, you know, 7 Second. I mean, it was great.
That's so good.
Ministry.
So you mentioned that you were doing competitive piano from quite an early age, I think from about 5. What did that competitiveness to music, did that instill a competitive nature in you in regards music?
I'm just not gonna lie, I'm like kind of competitive, but not like
you don't have to. That's nothing to be ashamed of.
I just think it's like a shitty thing to. Hey, I'm competitive. Like that doesn't equate like my ego. Like I am 100% so grateful to be in music. Every day I'm like, I get to do this, and as soon as I cross that threshold of not having to have a job and I could live making music, which has been going on over 11 years now, you know, pay all my bills. So that way, super grateful. And it's never like a jealous competitive. I'm just competitive with myself. Like that could be better, or I can make this better, or like that lyric could be this. Yeah. It's more like an inner competition. It's not really a reflective of other people's careers. I'm generally just stoked for, I know that sounds really Pollyanna-ish, but I don't really engage with that. Or I don't know. It's not interesting to me to be.
You're just pushing yourself.
Like, I'm not like, that person, I should have done. I'm just like, I don't know, it doesn't even make sense to me. I'm like, whatever.
Sure.
It doesn't, So when I say competitive, it is strictly brutal on myself. brutal competition with my own brain.
Right. So you leave, so you graduate from school and leave North Dakota. And I think is it Portland? Minneapolis?
Yes.
Portland that you head to first?
Yes, I went to Portland, and I really wanted to go to Portland because I was really into the punk scene and the riot girl scene there.
Okay. How do you even hear about that? Because this is pre-internet. Like, where are you being fed that information from when you're growing up?
So the nearest city, which was about an hour away, 45 minutes to an hour away, is Fargo, North Dakota, from where I live. And yes, we all talk like that. So yes, that's true. But people think like, Fargo, but Fargo happens to have 3 big universities and an influx of like 80,000 college kids.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Infest it in the most amazing way. So college kids tend, everybody who's only born in the internet, before the internet, we would go to record stores and we would buy zines, and we would tend to find a label that we really liked, and we'd write to them and get their catalog and then buy all those. So it was very much DIY style of finding what I liked. Yeah. Writing labels, getting catalogs. You couldn't buy Doc Martens. You had to order them from England. It was like that era. Like if you were a goth, where in my day, like there was no like Hot Topics. Like you'd really go for it. You'd really try it. Like it was like extremely difficult. There's no e-commerce going on.
So what do you find in Portland?
I want to just give props to the vibrant. I really cut my teeth on the Fargo music scene, which again happened to be this hub. I just want to give props to that city because that's really shaped me
Okay.
It was like a huge shaping experience. I saw Modest Mouse there. I saw White Stripes there. We would sneak into the shitty dive bar called Ralph's. It is an infamous U.S. punk club. It is no longer there, RIP, but it was the only venue to play if you're on tour between Minneapolis and Seattle.
Ah, okay.
It is the only place to play. So literally every band played there. Every band.
Wow.
I saw everyone in small clubs, first tours.
Yeah. I mean, you just mentioned a couple then. Who else are you, like, what are some of the ones that stand out?
Jesus Lizard, Babes in Toyland, Melvins, White Stripes, Blonde Redhead, I saw Stereolab, Sonic Youth.
Wow.
Yeah, it was insane.
Yeah.
Maybe not Sonic Youth. Maybe though. Maybe a side project. And there were shows just like all the time. Bikini Kill. Again, this was like this charming era in the American underground of independent labels. So it's like Sub Pop and, it wasn't like, oh, I started a band and then I got a major label record deal. Nothing's wrong with this, but this is a more familiar path these days.
Mm-hmm.
And then like we did a tour bus was our first tour. Like, no, we're in like a shitty Chevy van. Can I swear? Sorry.
Of course you can. Yeah, yeah.
We're in a Beauville, like an 84 Beauville with no brakes. You know, I mean, I can't even tell you how many tours I've done in one of those.
Really?
Good Lord. Oh, yeah. I mean.
With no brakes?
I toured in a van down to South by Southwest when Mark Ronson called me. This van barely had brakes. He called me and said, hey, would you mind if Bang 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 was the single off of my record? We can get to that later. But that really happened. And I was like barreling down the road with another like weird band. Just like, I'm going to die. We're going to die. The brakes, I drove it. I'm like, these brakes are like not like I have to pedal. It's like full of gear, like just like a ton of gear. Like literally 2,000 pounds. Yeah. This is quite. But anyways, yeah, I moved to Oakland. Or I mean to Portland.
To Portland, yeah. And that DIY, your experiences on that scene seem to be really key to informing the way that you've operated, particularly when you moved to Portland and then later moved to Oakland, that DIY aesthetic, that idea of just doing it. Is that where that impulse came from?
Yeah, and really in Minneapolis, I had a band that was quite big there, and then we got our first record deal, etc. And then I moved to Oakland. And I finished school in Minneapolis. But to sum that all up, absolutely, like I never thought like a major record, like everyone, the listening audience, just to time mark this is like mid 90s to, early aughts, like pre MySpace, this era was just like touring bands, selling CDs, selling tapes, selling print media, selling zines. Like you didn't even think that like you would get a record deal, or if you got it, you were just stoked. Maybe Sub Pop would sign you. Right. That was like the GOAT, Yeah. Holy shit. Then you're made, dude. Cause they'll like give us a little bit of tour. They'll give us $2,000 in tour support.
Yeah.
Oh shit. We're made and a booking agent, and they'll give us $10 a day. The club will give us like free dinner.
Right.
Whatever. I mean, it was quite charming. I loved it.
Yeah.
I just loved it.
These are your experiences in the band you just mentioned, Triangle, I think is that band you were referring to. Is that your experiences in Triangle and how that operated?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And along with everyone else in that scene. That and in all of the American underground. And we all knew each other, and we built these networks with each other. And like maybe you came to Minneapolis, St. Paul is this amazing, smallish. I mean, it's a small city in America, population wise. There is and Lizzo will talk about this because there is live music of every night in several venues. Not like, I'm talking like 10 of local bands.
Wow.
Like that. I just thought every city had shows every night at like 50 venues. I would make almost all of my expenses when I lived in Minneapolis just playing live.
Wow.
For the month.
Yeah.
Like playing 7th Street Entry, First Avenue, the Turf Club, Triple Rock. I mean, this is a small city.
Yeah.
Small.
Yes.
Like a very vibrant music scene. So another great music town.
Yeah.
I just like picked good music towns.
Right.
Cities.
Did you go to Minneapolis because of Triangle, or were you there already?
No, I left Portland because I don't like rain. I'd rather be in snow. I didn't like wet socks. I was like, this sucks. I don't like my socks wet.
Minneapolis, here I come.
Yeah, 19. That's your brain. Yeah, and then there was a string bass teacher I wanted to study with.
So you're studying music at this point. Like music is clearly where you're headed, and bass is your kind of key instrument at this time.
Yeah, my dad handed me a bass when I was 8 and said every band needs a good bass player, and then he taught me House of the Rising Sun. he's a bass player, and piano, and I was like, okay, cool, and I was like, and then I just like worked hard at that instrument, and in high school as a kid, I like won some like, you're a rural kid, here's a scholarship, an art scholarship to work with like a college professor on this instrument, just like to build sort of opportunities for the arts in these rural areas, right?
Right.
So I had this instructor, Bill Law, that I won this is in high school now. And that's when I was starting to get really into jazz, and he is just an unreal bass player, upright, electric, classical as well. And I learned how to fucking play bass from that dude.
Okay.
Big time. And then I like pooped out on piano. At age 18, I was like, the next level of this instrument on a classical level is just time I'm not willing to put into this.
Okay.
It just goes insane. The competitiveness of that instrument is nothing I'm interested. I just wasn't interested in that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, I'm just going to go to bass because no one really plays that, and I'll just... And I love bass, and I just didn't want to compete on an instrument anymore.
Sure. So what happens to, I from what I understand, Triangle is still ongoing in some regards, but at some point you decided to leave Minneapolis and head to Oakland. So Triangle is still happening at that point, or?
Yeah, we moved to Oakland as a band.
Gotcha.
In the collaborator, and my collaborator in that band, Brian Tester, is we were really early. Again, listening audience, this was like very early in home digital recording, software recording. And our band was like built around that idea. And we were like very interested in what was happening in Berlin at the time, in the late 90s, early 2000s. So we were very interested in sound design and making music with computers. But like OS 9, this is so nerdy, didn't support music plugins. I mean, this was so early that you would just buy gear. It was just like mayhem. Like you just be like, this dude, I think you'd be on weird boards trying to get your gear to work. I mean, I just remember like trying to get the interface to be recognized in the extensions for like 2 hours. And it's just being like, why? And then, but we made our albums on Logic, pre-Apple's buy of Logic.
Okay.
So it was a native product, I think, at the time, and it was us and a couple other nerds, Attacker and like I mean, there were a lot of people doing it, but it was very new in this space, and we were just, a lot of companies were making gear that they knew just didn't work. It was really weird.
Okay.
But they knew they had to get products out. There's this like race to get it out. It's just like really buck wild. Like it didn't work right. And downloading OMS for any MIDI people out there. I mean, just lots of weirdness. OS 9.
Right.
On Apple systems. But then my bandmate was very good friends with Monolake, who developed Ableton Live.
Yeah.
So he wrote the early manuals for Ableton. And we were touring with Ableton very early. And people used to throw beer bottles at us and call us like computers on stage were so taboo. Be like, what are you checking your email, you nerds?
When is this?
I remember that 2000,
Okay.
1990. I remember playing Philadelphia. I can't remember that venue now. And someone throwing stuff at us and making fun of us. Just like full stop making fun of us.
How did you take that?
I didn't give a shit. I was like, yeah, man, fuck you. I was like, and that was the punker in me, because I was like, grew up in the punk scene. I was just like, whatever, dude. Nerd. Or I was like, yeah, I'm a nerd. Like, who cares? I just don't care. I'll play to no one. Like, I don't care.
Right.
I just love playing. I played more to no one shows. I'm like, if you can rock a club show with only 2 or 5 people there and you blow their minds, that is the true test. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. For many years of that.
So Triangle was kind of like a hybrid sort of. There was obviously electronic elements, but indie elements as well. Like how would you even, is that pretty much what it was like?
Yeah, I would say like electro pop, IDM pop. It was super quirky and indie, but the Radio K is the U of M radio station really like loved it, and the local newspapers and music papers wrote a lot about it. And then we got a record deal with an indie called File 13, and that was super cool. And in those days you would go play CMJ, and we were definitely like in the scene with like Elephant Six, if anyone remembers that era.
Mm-hmm.
That was that, we were right in that pocket, and like, yeah, that world.
So Oakland sounds interesting, because I've read you say that you can't even really believe that you survived that. I think you were living in a rave collective called Underworld.
God,
so
you have done your research. I would say my story is kind of fun to read. I don't say that with a lot of ego.
Your story is, I was researching this interview going, I don't really know where to start. Because it's
really weird.
There's a lot that's gone on in your career and life.
Yes. So I moved to Oakland, and I moved there because my bandmate and I were really obsessed with what was happening in Berlin at the time, and which was IDM and like all this cool like Mouse on Mars and all that kind of stuff, like. And we were just obsessed with it. And the only place in America that was really had a vibrant scene that was like that was San Francisco and Oakland. Mm-hmm. And there was this like resurgence of like no wave going on, which I love that era of music a lot. So we moved there legitimately just because of that, which is so crazy when I think about it. And it's like 2001, maybe.
Okay. And it's a pretty wild place. You were living in a loft?
Yeah, I don't even like, I always lived in Oakland because I had no money. Like, I just want to put this out there. My parents are farmers. Like, we weren't dirt poor. Like, we would go to Disneyland. We drove there.
Right.
From North Dakota. You know, I wouldn't say we were poor. I wouldn't say we were wealthy. Or we could do things, but no one had money for Mandy's like magical music career. That wasn't happening. Right. They were like, cool, you want to do that? You can come here and eat, but don't come here for money, because we don't have money for that. Or in general for that. Which I'm very grateful they did do that. Yeah. And nor did I ever think they would support that. So, but they were supportive of, in general. But anywho, so in Oakland, in early 2000s, it was really crazy. Like anarchy, no rules, lots of crime, lots of drugs, lots of sex trafficking, like insane.
Wow.
And you could rent these huge warehouse spaces that were raw, and these people just wanted to rent. The landlords just wanted to rent it. And no one was like, yeah, I don't know if what are your intentions here? They just want to rent this shit because it was wild out there and it was dangerous and they couldn't get these space. You're going to rent it? Great, rent it. I don't care what you do in here. Mm. So, of course, artists would make these collectives and we would build it out. We would build like our societies, how it worked, and like the kitchens and the bathrooms. Like they were raw spaces, nothing in them.
Yeah.
It wasn't like my loft in the movies, look at my funky loft, no, it was like rats and insanity and broken windows and building rooms and then we would throw shows and art shows. And I lived in many of them and they all had names. It was like they were little towns in Oakland.
And you would set your own rules and your own ways of living in each of them?
Yeah, we'd have meetings and like how it would work, and yeah, and I lived in many of them. The first one I lived in was Liminal, and I built that room out. And that did a lot of art shows and shows. And a lot of like that era of music, I'm trying to think like the biggest band to come out of that from the Bay Area was definitely God, my brain is just fried. I'll think of it.
That's okay.
I will be like, of
Sure.
course. Deerhoof.
Gotcha.
And like, you know, we would be throwing Deerhoof shows and and but there were no rules. Like no one was like, can't just like wire electricity. We were just like, yeah, whatever. Or it's just like, it was like a true cyberpunk San Francisco Burning Man, weird, like, you know, and people just like out there.
Was it a good time?
Real. Yeah, man, it was awesome and totally, I can't believe I didn't die. I mean, I just can't believe we didn't burn in our warehouses alive and like RIP. That's what happened in Ghost Ship. Some of long story short, I lived in many of them. Liminal, Underworld was the rave one, and that one was quite old. It started in the 80s, I think, and it was like 40 or 50 of us, and I would open the doors to the main room where the really original members of Underworld Collective lived, and I'm not joking, the room was a 3-story giant warehouse, and they built in a town in there with koi ponds.
Oh, wow.
And like, yeah, like houses. They built houses in there.
Wow.
Yeah, it looked like the Ewok village. I remember just walking in there being like, what is going on? But I lived in their Gabber part, and that was not tight. It's just speed ridden, like horrible. But it was like a old office space, and I like tore the ceiling down, the drop ceiling, and I just built my room all the way to the roof. And I just slept on a platform up there. Wow. And then I glued walls together.
You just
and taped them.
Together.
Yeah.
Are you DJing at this time? What are you doing?
Yeah, I was just playing in bands, and I was super involved with like noise and experimental music. So doing that, but for like a weird raver, punker, noiser, I always had a job. That's the anxiety kept me from going off the cliff. Like I was like one of my 35 jobs, and I always worked a job. Or okay. I'd be on tour. I mean, the reason I had 35 jobs is because I would quit my job to go on tour.
Yeah.
And then I would come back, hopefully enough money to make it to the next job.
Okay.
Weirdly not stressed out doing that, by the way. Just like, yeah, bobbed along with that lifestyle.
After the break, Amanda talks about working with Mark Ronson and surviving the major label feeding frenzy that followed Bang Bang Bang. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with MNDR. So when do you create the MNDR persona or moniker and start DJing under that name?
Well, at Triangle, my band was like, I don't want to say we were petering out, but I mean, we've been together a long time. I think it was like 8 years. And we were doing this, there used to be this awesome party called All Tomorrow's Parties. Yeah. It was a festival.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did All Tomorrow's Parties in London or in England, which was super fun. We did an English tour, and that was like, yeah, we got asked to do All Tomorrow's Parties. For your listeners, this was really pre-festival. There was only really Coachella and this.
Right.
And it was like the organizers would choose curators to curate the entire event. So some years it would be Matt Groening from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then our year, I can't remember who chose us, but someone chose us. So, and we were kind of like psychedelically, this Frank Zappa meets like Talking Heads or something. I mean, we were just like, I don't know, bizarro. Really awesome though. Great music. Or not commercial at all.
So, right.
But yeah, and then it just, I was just like, I don't know, I wanted to do more, you know, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to start this thing called It's Just My Name, MNDR. I love techno, minimal techno, like Midwestern techno. I love that. We can get into that later. I don't know. I mean, I love music, so I love a lot of music. And one of the styles I love is Chicago house and Detroit techno. So techno, I was like, MNDR is like techno-y sounding, and I'm going to do live sets with only external gear, not DJing. I'm just going to have like drum machines and stuff.
And this is about when? Like 2006, 2007?
Yeah.
And in Oakland, or have you moved to New York by this point?
No, in Oakland.
In Oakland, okay.
And then I was doing this other collective, like artist collective band called Zeroth, which I'm still do. We just do museum shows. It's a collective of a woman who's a robotics artist and a sound installation artist and a shadow puppet artist, and I'm boring. I'm the dorky musician, and we do these
sounds awesome.
performances at different museums. We do usually just one a year. Anyways, 0th if you're interested.
Okay.
And then I just was like, yeah. And then people started to like this, but it was not what it is now.
No.
It was like, no, not at all. It was like techno beats. And I would do like sort of live vocals with delays and like sequencing of vocals, but like very Black Dice-ish or something, like very Animal Collective, very much that psychedelic kind of ideas. Community, like sort of, yeah, like it wasn't techno. It wasn't like Derek Mills up there. I was like doing weird psychedelic delay throws, just weird stuff with a live mixer and stuff.
Yeah. So at that point, I mean, could you have foreseen what MNDR has become?
No. And then at some point, I just shit you not. I was super involved with noise and experimental music, and I was doing some touring in Europe and the noise and experimental festivals. And then I was just like, one day I was like, what if I make like music that's very unpopular? Mm-hmm. And keeps people away. And what if I just made popular music? It just was like, I'm not even joking. That was like the thought process on it.
Okay.
So, 7, 8. And so through Triangle, we had weirdly gotten wrapped up in a really draconian, awful publishing deal. Long story short, and I just reached out to the publisher who had never talked to us. And I was like, hey, I'm just going to be a music producer. I'm a music producer. And they're like, okay. And I was like, what do I do? How do we make that work? And they're like, come to New York. And I made a song with some of my friends in Triangle and other bands called Ride My Bike. And they're like, this song is awesome. And it was like such a fuck off song. I was like, okay. And they're like, come to New York. And I was just like, okay. And I like rubbed whatever 5 cents, 2 nickels I had together and like appeared in New York, but like built a tour around it.
Right.
So I could like make a little bit of money with MNDR.
Yeah.
So when I talk about community, I talk about like all of these communities. And being part of a community really got me a lot of opportunities, in different ways. So, and then, I would go to New York and they would send me, I just went there once and I met all these producers and they all wanted to like sign me to production deals and like, you could be the next Lady Gaga. And I was like, I didn't even know who she was.
Right. They're meeting you through your publisher, or how's that happening?
Yeah, it's sort of like a formal thing. And then, but they would send me out to, this really cracks me up because in the music industry world, if you're a songwriter, right? There's certain definitions. So you have a session set up. Here's a producer and here's a writer and here's an artist. And I remember sitting there and I didn't know what to do. So I would bring all my demos of all my productions. And I'd be like, oh, can I play you some of my work? And they'll be like, are you an artist? Because I would be there as a writer and I'd be like, I didn't know the definition. So I'd be like, yeah, aren't we all artists? I mean,
right.
But I would just answer like, yeah. And so then they thought I was like doing an artist, like I was there to make my album with them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Totally. So there's
who's on first, what's on second?
Right. There are these role groups that you weren't even conscious of existing almost.
I didn't have shoes, for God's sakes. I remember before I went to New York, I was like, I can't just wear flip-flops. It's like fall there. I need to go buy shoes. So I like just kind of bopped along. And then I just was like weirded out. There are a lot of gender roles. It was just like, I found the music industry at that level. I was like, why are there so many rules as to what I can do and not do? And I just didn't when I say, I don't say that I was irreverently like, I don't understand this. I was literally like, what? Because I was living like, and only I can equate what I imagine the paradise of Frank Zappa's creation was. I mean, I was just in a totally different planet. I was on planet San Francisco, Oakland, and that is not on planet Earth. I don't even think that should be called America there. It's just completely cuckoo and like amazing. Just very different culturally.
Right.
The rest of the US. So, and I love it. I love all you Oakland Bay Area, but I keep my 5'10", y'all.
So what happens then when you get pulled into that world even more with the Mark Ronson collaboration for Bang Bang Bang, and there's this, so you were just talking about going to those sessions where it just didn't make sense to you, some of the role groups and all that sort of stuff. Then you get pulled into even more.
Yeah. And so what happened was, and again, like coming from a space where your gender was never considered in your ability. I mean, when you're in punk and DIY and noise spaces, they don't care if you're a girl or a boy. Like, no one cares. Or whatever you're identifying as, like, no one cares. Like, so I met one producer, Peter Wade, who just like heard, I played him. I was like, oh, hey, that made this thing. And he just like went. And I was making my stuff on Ableton. And it was like 2008, I think I met him, 2007 or 8. I was set up at a session with him. And I came with like 1,000 bags because I was hopping on a $10 bus, like a Chinatown bus to Baltimore to play a warehouse there later that night. And and he was like, why do you have all this shit? And I'm like, oh, I'm playing a weird show later or whatever. I was like, oh, I'm playing a show. And then he's like, okay, weirdo. And then he just heard this thing I made and he's like, he thought this one song sounded like the computer in the Jetsons. I'm not even kidding you. And he's just like, he told me this later and he just was like, he thought what I was making was cool. And he thought that sound was funny. And he goes, oh, can you bounce me the stems? I just want to. And he treated me like an equal in the studio.
Right.
Like my gender wasn't even thought about. Like the idea of those dynamics wasn't even, he just was like, oh, that's cool. Here. Oh, can you send me that? And then he started doing all this stuff and I was like, whoa. And then that ended up being one of the first songs that really took off on my MySpace, which I had a viral moment on there, which is a song called CLUB or UBCL. Yeah. And it turned into that. And then he would be like, what if we wrote this to like this? And then I was like, cool. But it was because I had someone that was listening to me. That doesn't happen in music industry.
And that was your experience leading up to that point.
Yes. And that's all I really wanted. Because I wasn't even aware of what I wanted. I just like didn't understand why, like my studying classical music from the age of 5. Like when I was saying I was a competitive player, I competed in concerto competitions. I mean, I played concertos for fuck's sake. You know, and I had a classical degree and I was a professional jazz player. In Minneapolis, I had a jazz trio and I had an opportunity to go to New York and just quit school and go play professionally. You know, I had a lot of music. It doesn't mean I'm better than anyone, but I actually have a lot of experience. Sure. And it was only one person that took me seriously.
That's crazy.
Because the expectation is you're hot and you're the girl and you do the singing and I do this and then and I knew a lot about recording on software because my bands were all based around that. We're all based around recording. Yeah. From 4 tracks to digital recording, multi-track, like the VS840 series. Roland put out a bunch of digital recording devices. Sure. Pre-computer or sort of product based. But yeah, so that, and because of that, because I had agency in that, I don't know, I can reflect and use this language now about it. Sorry, I'm really monopolizing this.
Not at all. Not at all.
I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Not about me, but for music, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking it must have given you a really unique perspective when things did take off, when you got introduced to Mark Ronson, you collaborated on Bang Bang Bang, and you were touring with him, and all of a sudden there are major labels swirling around, and who are you? Like, who's this? Let's have a meeting. Your background and all those things you just mentioned must have given you a really unique perspective on how to deal with that interest and what you were willing to do and not do when talking to them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways you can think about that journey for me. Now, it's always a watermark hit with the years that I was having my air quotes come up. Now, you're talking to someone who wasn't participating in even indie rock at that point. I was in noise music. I didn't know what Fader magazine was. I remember Fader reached out and I hit up Peter and I was like, this magazine Fader wants to do a piece on me. And he goes, you need to email them back right away. In fact, when Mark Ronson's team reached out to me to come on, he had a radio show on the Lower East Side on 2nd and A, East Village Radio. No, not 2nd and A. First and Houston, I think, right there. And it was fucking cool. It's like a storefront. People just hanging out. And he's like DJing. It was like talent. And I was like, some guy named Mark Ronson wants me to come to his radio show. And Peter was like, you need to go to that. And I was like, but it's snowing out. I'm kind of just like, I don't really want to go out. I live like deep in Brooklyn, you know, and some shit. He's like, get on the train now and go, you idiot. And then I looked him up and I was like, oh, I knew who Amy Winehouse was. It wasn't like I was that out of it. But I was like, oh, it's the Amy Winehouse guy. I was like, oh, that's cool. But I was always like, I don't make Amy Winehouse music. Why would he want to talk to me?
He'd heard CLUB? Is that where he'd heard you?
He had heard all my demos on MySpace, and I think through Fader, and he was making record collection. And Fader, this is an era where Fader, like, if they co-signed you, you were on your way, really. And they co-signed me big time because I also had a blog, and I blog about gear.
Right.
And they thought that was really crazy. Like, who is this weirdo blogging about gear?
Because you were in a field of one in that respect?
Yeah, I was in a field. It was just like me and myself and I, the three of us together, blogging about gear. So he reached out. I went there. I played him a song called Sparrow Song, and he loved it. He premiered it on his radio station, and he said, hey, would you want to work on my record with me? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if I'll like the music. That is literally what I said to him.
Which is not what a lot of people in that position would say.
No one would say that. And I don't say that because I was irreverent. I literally was that naive to that side of the music business.
He probably appreciated that, did he? He probably thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, because Mark's fucking cool. Mark is the coolest motherfucker in this, like, Mark Ronson is the GOAT. Like, to be working at that high level and just fucking be that guy is that doesn't happen. None of the other ones are like that. He's the only one. He's the only one to do that. To give me a shot? Why would you give me a shot? Like, so I went out there and I was like, he's like, well, would you want to come to the studio and hear what I was making? And I said, yeah. But I said, I don't know if I'll work on it if I like it. It didn't make sense to me to work on stuff I don't like.
Sure.
And then I heard it and I was like, I knew what he was referencing. I was like, oh my God, you're doing like a YMO, like all this shit. And then I was like, have you ever heard OMB's Dazzle Ships? Have you ever heard of this? And he was like, no, I've never heard this. And like, da-da-da-da-da. And so Mark Ronson is a record geek.
Right.
And we're both Virgos, so we're like nerds.
Me too.
You're a Virgo. Okay, yeah. So we just talk about records. To this day, we just, like, occasionally when we get a chance to hang out, it's just like, blah, 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 guitar playing on the blah, blah. Like, it's pretty dorky. He sucks. You know? So we got on right away, and then I was too scared to sing in front of him. I didn't consider singing would be my first instrument. And I said, can I just take it and work on it? And then I worked on it with Pete. I still needed, to give Pete credit here. I wasn't ready for what that is. I didn't have a skill. I had like tons of music and been in tons of bands and played on everything, blah, blah, blah. But that's a specific skill set that I didn't have many hours in yet. Mm. Right. And Pete had, and I wasn't I could write lyric, but I didn't consider myself a lyricist for pop music, for God's sakes, you know. I didn't even consider that, but I remember when we were working on Bang Bang Bang, Mark begged me to work on that because no one could unlock it, but he loved it. And I didn't want to. I actually wrote him another song on that record that it was a beat that D'Angelo ended up writing on. And I took my song off. It's called Blue Jean Youth. And I put it on my album. I reproduced it with Pete. Pete and I did. And then he begged me to do the Bang 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 rhythm. And I was like, what ended up being that? And I was like, Mark, but this is such a weird, like, the chords are modulating within the measure. This is hard. Like, but I don't even think I said that. I just think I went, all right. And I was like, but I knew why it was hard or something. And then I just started singing that Alouette Jetta. I just started singing this like French Canadian nursery rhyme. Yeah. And Pete was like, what was that? I was like, Alouette, da, 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 da. And I was like, oh, what if it went bang? And then I started thinking of like Serge Gainsbourg, like bang, bang. And then it just like naively came together. Yeah.
So it becomes a big hit. Were you prepared for what followed?
No. Also, MNDR was already like touring. And I was like shitting myself because I was like, I have a real booking agent. I was like, woo! Because Triangle never had a real booking agent. None of the bookers would take us on. So I'd always have to book my tours. And MNDR never had a booking agent. And I was like, I'm a booking agent and I'm going on tour. And I was opening up for Massive Attack. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And then I just done this song. And then in pure Mark Ronson fashion, he would be like, and everyone has to know I was starving in New York. I was starving to death. I literally was. I was unwell. I had budgeted $10, $15 a day. I would choose to work with this one person who would buy me lunch. Sometimes I wouldn't eat during the weekend.
Wow.
It was like, I was busted up. I was not well. I remember one night someone bought me a steak dinner and the next day I worked with Pete and he's like, what? Your color is so vibrant. I was just like unwell.
Right.
I was like starving to death there.
So,
I'm not even joking.
What?
Not to death, but I was unwell. I was
Yeah. So what if that opportunity hadn't come along? Where do you think you would have ended up?
Job,
Right.
which was cool with me. I kind of like this. The point came before all of this happened where I just said, I'm always just going to make music. I just promised myself as many hours I had to work a job a day, I was going to work on music. And I was like, I'll always put on shows and be part of my music community. I love doing that. That's just like who I am, and that was cool. And as soon as I like accepted that, everything happened in a really beautiful way.
Okay.
And like in New York, like people I put on shows for that were now big, like cool Brooklyn bands would be like, oh, Amanda's in town. Yeah, you can open up for us. Blah, blah, blah. Or like Todd P. Or like also all this stuff was happening. And then Pete, I was doing all this stuff. He's like, how can you get all these shows? And I'm like, I just know all these people. I just been in the underground for that. But anyways, I had a booking agent and MNDR was going. And Mark would call me and be like, hey, Amanda, do you care? No, he's got MNDR. He always calls me MNDR. Would you care if we put Q-Tip on this song? And I was like, what? I remember just being like, what? Q-Tip? From like, Tribe? I was like, yes, that would be okay with me. I was kind of freaked out.
Right.
I wish I enjoyed it more. I was just like literally freaked out.
Yeah.
I was freaking. And my anxiety really manifested then, which I look back and I was like, oh, I wish I could have enjoyed this time a little bit more.
Yeah.
When the record industry descended upon me like vultures.
Is that what
Not Mark Ronson.
No. But is that what it felt like?
It was awful. It was a very restrictive time for pop. It was, I'm not even kidding you. The meetings would be like, you get to be Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, or Kesha. That's it. We want to sign you and give a big deal. And I would just listen. I didn't even know their music. I would listen to it and I would just be like, I don't like their music. I love you, Kesha, if you're listening. She was a good friend. But at the time I didn't. Like, I'm sorry, I just didn't like that kind of music. Yeah. And like even Dr. Luke, they'd be like, Dr. Luke wants to work with you. And I'd listen and I was like, what has he done? And they're like, TikTok. And I was like, oh, I don't. But I didn't mean it mean. I was like, what would we make together? I don't like his music. The reason I worked with Mark is because I liked what he was doing.
Yeah.
It was really simple. It's a simple equation.
It has the potential to be, people could complicate it, that situation, because some people would go, this is my big break. Dr. Luke, sure. You want to make me like Kesha or Katy Perry? Sure. Like, let's go for it. And I think that, again, it comes back to your background and the way that you view music and your role in it.
Yeah, and it wasn't, in the naivety, there's bliss in that level of naivety. There just is. There's a lot of freedom in that, and that sort of naivety. I just was like, to me, I was like, well, why would I make some music with people I don't like what they're doing at all at any level? Like, why would I make music with them? And let me tell you that at that time does not gain you a lot of love in the music business. I would say I love the music industry, but I am not a fan of the music business.
Right. Right.
And I experienced the grossest parts of it. But I stood my ground and I paid for it. I'd probably be bigger, but I probably would have crashed and burned. I'd be done. They would have thrown it at radio and I'd have some dipshit song that sounded like, Mandy don't in a buys no offense. Gosh, I love you. Like, she's like a good friend. I work on her records, but and people have to understand I was already 30 at that time. Yeah. I wasn't 20. Maybe if I was 20, I would have been up for that. Like, I don't give a shit and you're just partying. But I was 30. I definitely knew who I was and what the brand was and why people liked it. And I always held on to that because I was like, I don't care about the music business. I care about the fans. And I was saying that at a time where I was saying no to everything. And you shouldn't do that back then. I can't express this to people. Like now we have a lot of freedom because of democratization. And now when I work with artists, they run the show with their labels. Rewind pre-streaming, pre-social media. No. That is not how that works. No.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
No.
Think about some of the artists you've worked with: Charlie XCX, Kylie Minogue, Rita Ora. These are people who are in the pop realm, but so you're seeing that their experience of being in the pop realm these days is different to what you experienced. Is that the case?
Yeah, but I would say like Charlie definitely experienced like, hits and ups and downs and, because she was, she'd been signed for a long time, like since she was a teenager, 15, I think, or something like that. And Kylie has been through it all, but I think their goals were much different, like they want to be pop stars. I weirdly make pop music. I don't try to do it. I know this just sounds really pretentious, but for whatever reason, electropop comes out of me. I don't know why. Right. It just does. But I am not interested in pop star shit. I don't like outfits. And I mean, in my era, they used to tell me I had to lose 40 pounds. I mean, you're telling someone who's in a punk art collective, 40 pounds. I would have been like, I am Swedish and 5'9". You would be like under 100 pounds? Like, I'd be dead. I mean, I don't think I would just die. Like and that was okay to say that to me. And I would just laugh at them. I would be like, why don't you fucking lose 40 pounds, man? I also have like epic meetings where I remember one had a I don't even know I can't remember what meeting it was. It's like huge like record president. It wasn't that I was irreverent like the Sex Pistols. It really was naive. Like I just chose this mindset that was like Occam's razor. The simplest answer is generally the right one. Right. And I remember this guy, every A&R, all the VPs were there, the big meeting with MNDR. She's the Mark Ronson single. And he listened to my demos and he goes, frankly, I think you have a ceiling. And I just looked at him and I was like, well, I don't know why I would sign here. I don't like any of the music you put out. Like, I don't like any of it. Because they tell you like, well, we got this and we got that and we got... look at this shiny thing. And I just didn't. That was my way. I just was like, why would I sign here?
What was the response?
Utter shock.
Right.
And I didn't mean it shitty. I just was like, well, I meant it like empathetically. I was like, well, that makes sense. Why would I sign here? I don't like any of the music you put out. You don't like my music. So why would I do this? Okay, bye. Bye. Good luck with that. I'm out of here.
I think that one of the sad things about some of the stuff you've just said is that there would be some people in your position who were told to lose 40 pounds who would then go, all right, I've got to do that. And I'm sure there have been people in that position, women in that position.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know several. I know several that their labels just hired them trainers. That was part of their budget. Trainers. Fuck you. You know what I mean? I love this era because like that shit's done. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, my story is my story. I don't mean this so ego, like I'm so important. Like I'm grateful to have a drop in pop culture pond and this horse still runs. I'm still in the game. That's cool, tight, whatever game it is. I don't know. I made my own rules and I have a studio and I live in East LA and whatever.
It's amazing.
I can't, I'm not like up there, like I'm not at the VMAs being like, what's up everyone? MNDR here. I don't give a shit. Fuck off with that. But like, I mean, I'm wearing a Creep Show t-shirt right now. So like what I'm getting at is I completely lost my train of thought is what I'm getting at.
That's okay. That's all right.
But no, my journey, what I was saying, my journey is about, I said no and people thought I was nuts. And I'm sure I did stall the possibility of how big MNDR could have gotten. And I don't regret those decisions ever.
That's good.
Because MNDR is 100% mine.
Yeah.
And I don't have to answer to anyone. I don't have to make it anyway. I don't have to do any of that shit. Yeah. I don't have to worry about like marketing or who's put on radio format. We got like I can make the most indulgent, weird ass shit I want to make. My people will listen to it. Not a lot. Some people, though.
That's
What
awesome.
else? There's a trade-off, right?
Yeah, totally.
But, like, I get a lot of shit. I did, like, get a lot. I mean, the stories are horrendous, what I went through. It was awful. And I'm someone who's, like, seen some shit.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some shit, and I have lived through some serious shit. And the music industry was the most difficult I'd ever been through.
Does that, are you able to, when you're working with artists, do you find yourself mentoring them in that regard, or just seeing some of the things they've been asked to do and giving them advice, or no? What
I like to do is I just create a space when I work with them that's like, I don't even need to say it. I'm like, you're going to come in here and we're just going to make something cool that you like. There's no tricks. I don't have any like agendas. I don't got anything like that. You want to be creative? This is about being creative. If you come into my studio and start talking about your lawyers and like dipshit stuff, I don't. That happens occasionally, and I'm always like, yeah, I don't know you, and I certainly don't want to talk about the music business right now. Like attorneys and managers, that's not interesting to me. But if you want to just make some like fucking cool shit, yeah. I'm sorry, I swear a lot.
It's good.
Sorry, listener base. Like, we're gonna have a great time.
Nice. And
we're gonna be laughing, even if it's the saddest song you ever wrote. We're gonna have fun, and if it's not fun, I'll be like, oh, let's just quit. Music is fun.
Absolutely.
And that's like my way of doing anything. If I'm not having fun, I usually am just like, maybe this isn't the thing today.
Hey, Amanda, I could ask you questions.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Not at all. I could ask you questions for the next few hours, but we are out of time. But the last thing I wanted to ask you is that Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due.
I know.
Are there people you give credit to for helping you get where you are?
Absolutely. Peter Wade, he saw a very, very rough stone. I don't even like, I don't want to say diamond. That is way corny. But he saw something and heard something in my voice, and he is truly the developer of what my singing voice sounds like on recordings. He's incredible. He's an incredible producer, engineer, and I learned so much from him. Mark Ronson, hands down, absolutely, like, pivotal. Mark Ronson also gave me the space in the studio did not care where I came from or certainly what my background was. He is purely interested in making something great. Jesse Shacken, another great producer that relentlessly works with me for God knows why. Because it's always weird. But there's been many others, but those three, and Maria Egan, who was at my publisher and is now at Splice. And really, like, my music educators, Sharon Westbrook, Bill Law, Kurt Vandermeer, my dad. Those right. People really shaped me. And no one ever at that stage said I couldn't or wasn't able to. So I'm really grateful for a lot of people to just be like, never even thought, like, girls don't do that. Or, that was kind of the era of that. And that wasn't even a thing. So I'm grateful for that. But I also want to say, can I just say something, 2 things before we leave? As an independent artist, I'm really happy to announce I have this new album, Held to Be You Baby, that we were discussing. But I finance that entire project, and I take a bet on myself, and I'm really grateful that song is being used in the ad campaign for the Google 6 Pixel cell phone.
Right. Which
for independent artists, we really depend on great campaigns that fit our point of view. So I'm really grateful for that for many reasons.
Sure.
And also, I have a Discord server called Gacked on Gear, GAKKEDONGEAR. And .com, you can get an invite. It is dedicated. We're right now in an era where only 2% of working creatives are women, let alone LGBTQIA plus people in the creative making process. I'm one of a handful of women producers in the music business. The Annenberg USC study audits the music business every 2 years, I believe, and the numbers are awful. And my Discord is not about MNDR. It's actually knowledge sharing and community based on asking questions and a new space for up and coming producers and mix engineers to ask questions, share knowledge, and share work. So it's the spirit of where I came from.
Nice.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that. And MNDR.com is where you can follow me on all social media because unfortunately, I need to do that.
Absolutely. Amanda, thanks so much for your time. It's so great to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. I'm sorry if I blabbed too much, Rod.
No blabbing at all. It was great.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks. And thanks to Jaxsta for showing the world who works on these records.
Right.
Because a lot of times there is no credits in the digital space, and Jaxsta is changing that. And credits are important for creatives to get more work and also to memorialize their work. So we're really grateful for everything they're doing.
That's our pleasure. And we believe in it very much. So thank you. And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to Amanda for her time, and thank you for listening. Just a reminder that Amanda's new album, Hell to Be You Baby, is out now. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.